Hello everyone, today I'll be giving my farewell slash kind of like celebratory speech. Alright, so like I said, farewell speech to Pavement Resources. I worked there for 2 summers. It was an asphalt and road maintenance company. Really looking back on those 2 summers, they ended up being such a big part of who I am today. I realized just how much I actually went through at Pavement Resources. And when I first started, I thought I was just signing up for a summer job, something simple, a way to stay busy, make some money, and maybe get a little experience. I definitely didn't realize I was also signing up for, 16-hour days, extreme heat, and really learning skills that I never even thought about before. Those summers turned out to be something much more intense and challenging, and honestly, much more memorable than I ever expected. So really from the beginning, the job made one thing very clear. This was real work. The days were long, often stretching into 16 hours. Once things kind of started in the morning, there wasn't much slowing down until the job was done. Early mornings came fast, and the evenings felt like it took, a very long time. And somewhere in between, you just kind of learned to keep moving. And the main thing there was the heat as well. So there were days where it didn't just feel like the sun was, above us, but it was actively working against us. So the pavement would radiate the heat right back up. When you're working near fresh asphalt, it honestly feels like you're standing next to something that should come with a warning label. It's just super hot. That asphalt gets like 300 degrees. So it really burned us up from the outside. And you weren't just working outside, it kind of felt like you were working in almost a giant moving oven, but what stood out wasn't just the difficulty, it was how normal everyone made it seem. So the crew around me never acted like it was unusual or special to be working in those conditions. It was just another day, and that mindset really stuck with me. So, of course, not every moment was serious or intense. There were definitely moments where things got a little ridiculous, which honestly was probably the only way that you would really survive that kind of work. But one moment I'll never forget involves fuel and a set of poor decisions for myself. I was trying to help fill out one of the asphalt machines with diesel, and I believe I put gasoline in it. So I just handled it wrong, and I had to end up siphoning it out of the machine with my mouth, which I learned the hard way. Gas does not taste good at all. So that was almost couple thousand dollar mistake that I made. But I quickly learned that some lessons in construction are really taught is instantly and usually the hard way. So I definitely gained some very proper respect for specific machines and making sure that I get things right the first time. And that moment became one of those stories you can laugh about later, but in the moment it was definitely a reminder that while I'm on the job site, attention to detail matters a lot. And as I got more comfortable, I started learning, just how many different skills were involved in the work we did. I learned how to maneuver heavy machinery, which at first felt like trying to control something way bigger and more powerful than me. But over time, I really got confident with it through repetition and guidance from the crew. And I also worked with trucks, handled pallets, got familiar with how materials move throughout the job site. And really, I learned how to stay coordinated for the job to run smoothly. So I worked with asphalt pulleys and really started to understand how every piece of equipment kind of played a role in keeping things moving. And a big thing too there was raking the hot asphalt. It was just something that really tested both patience and endurance from us, and I really appreciate learning that, just because it was such a difficult skill to pick up on. But it really showed once you practice something, you can really get a whole lot better at it. So over the course of the first few months, I was really able to get a better understanding and become better at my job. It really depends on your focus, and a lot of persistence. But none of these skills, came instantly. They came through repetition, mistakes, and corrections, and learning from people who have been doing this for years. So I was lucky to be around people who were willing to teach while also expecting me to improve. That balance really made a huge difference. Over time, I started to notice changes in myself as well. I became more patient, more aware of how important communication is when you're working on a team, especially where someone can get hurt. I also learned how, even when you're tired, uncomfortable, or just ready to be done for the day, sometimes you just have to keep going, and you really have to focus on your task, that's in front of you rather than everything going on around you. So those lessons didn't just stay on the job site. What made this experience even more interesting and beneficial for me is where I am now. So I'm currently pursuing a finance degree, which is about as different from construction work as you can get on paper. One is spreadsheets, analysis in classrooms, and the other is, heat, machinery, and asphalt that feels like it's trying to melt everything nearby. So surprisingly, the connection between the two is really stronger than it looks. The discipline I built working those 16-hour days contributes directly to how I approach school now, and the teamwork can definitely help me in like group projects and collaborative work, as well as my problem solving skills. So, and maybe most importantly, I learned what effort really looks like. Not the kind that you talk about, but the kind you do when you're exhausted, covered in dust and sweating through the heat, and still finishing the job because it has to get done. You know, when I think back on those summers, I don't just remember the long hours of the heat, I remember the people that I worked with. And you know, the conversations during breaks, the jokes that helped pass the time. And so the moments where everyone, you know, was tired, but we found a way to laugh about it. And I learned a couple lessons definitely the hard way. So those memories are really, you know, what made this experience meaningful, and not just what I did, but who I was doing it with, you know. And so as I move forward into a completely different field, I'm planning to carry those lessons with me, you know. So as I kind of close this chapter for Pavement Resources, I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity, the experience, and for the lessons I didn't even realize I was learning at the time. You know, those 2 summers really challenged me. They built me up and they gave me memories I'll probably, you know, remember for years to come. So I just wanted to say thank you for everything at Pavement Resources, and specifically the owner. We called him the big man upstairs, but his name was Jeff. So he was the owner, and I just appreciate everything that I learned at that position. Thank you.